Good evening. It is March 1st, 2022. It is 5:33 p.m. Welcome to the San Marino Unified School District Board of Education special meeting. Here is your president, Mrs. Namjack.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. I'm going to call the meeting to order March 1, 2022, and it is 5:39. 5:33. Thank you. Sorry. We are in person at 1665 West Drive, San Marino in the boardroom. You can also join us virtually via Zoom at http://www.smusd.us/media. All meetings of the board are open to the members of the public unless publicly noticed as a confidential closed session is allowed by law. Members of the public may address the board as outlined in the public comment section of the agenda. The audio of all meetings is recorded, and a member of the public may be held liable for any slanderous or otherwise defamatory statements. In consideration of the board and the members of the audience, please turn off, silence your cell phones while in the boardroom. The Unified School District encourages those with disabilities to participate fully in the public meeting process. If you need a disability-related modification or accommodation, including auxiliary aids or services, to participate in the public meeting, contact the assistant to the superintendent at j.dilatorre@smusd.us or 626-299-7000 extension 1310 at least 48 hours before the scheduled board meeting so that we may make every reasonable effort to accommodate you. Documents provided to the majority of the board regarding an open session item on this agenda will be made for public inspection in the district office located at 1665 West Drive during normal business hours. In addition, such writings and documents may be viewed on the district's website at www.smusd.us. All right, it is a call to order. So Pledge of Allegiance, can we stand and face the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, item 2B, approval of the agenda. It is an action item. May I ask for a motion to approve the agenda?
To approve the agenda?
Mrs. Chan, is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Kolaki, roll call vote. Mr. Kolaki?
Aye.
Mr. Chang?
Aye.
Mrs. Chan?
Aye.
Namjack, aye. See, now we are to item number 3, public comments. The board has adopted board policy 9323B to ensure the public's right to be heard in any matters pertaining to the school district. Public comment is limited to only those items listed on the special meeting agenda. Persons who wish to provide public comment have 3 options. 1, submit an online form. 2, request to speak during the meeting via Q&A and phone dial-in. Or 3, request to speak during the meeting in person via the public comment card. Submit through an online form. The public may submit public comments to the open session on March 1 from 11 a.m. through 3:30 p.m. Comments received during this time will not be read during the meeting, but will be provided to the board. I believe that as of 3:30, there were no comments. Is that correct? Thank you so much. Now, request to speak during the meeting via Q&A and phone dial-in. During public comment, the meeting will pause for 1 minute to take requests to speak. The raise hand function is used to take requests during the public comment. For online attendees, press the raise hand icon to add yourself to the queue. For phone attendees, dial *9. The speaking order will be determined based on the order of requests received. Individual speakers will be unmuted and called to speak. Dr. Choi?
Thank you. We're pausing for 1 minute. If you'd like to make a request to speak regarding matters on the agenda, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. 30 seconds remain. If you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9 by phone or submit a public comment card. We have no requests.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. Request to speak during the meeting in person via the public comment card. Please complete the public comment card and submit the completed card to the designated drop box with the assistant to the superintendent no later than when the agenda section action discussion is called by the board president. Opportunities for public comment are offered prior to the action/discussion section for matters on the agenda. The board reserves the right to add a public comment period prior to any individual item on the agenda. 5 minutes may be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 20 minutes to each subject matter. However, in the event there are more than 4 speakers on the same subject matter, the board president retains the discretion to adjust and limit the time allocated to each speaker to ensure that all wishing to speak will be heard within the 20-minute allotment. I believe that there are no public comment cards. Is that correct? Thank you very much. All right. So now we go to item number 4, superintendent search, approval of the contract with the Koski Group. The board will determine whether to approve entering into a contract with the Koski Group to conduct the superintendent search for the school district. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to approve the contract with the Koski Group.
Mrs. Chan, a second? Mr. Chang, any discussion?
Was there, I understand that there was a document that was in the materials previously provided by the Koski Group, but do we have a contract that's actually filled out that we can review?
I believe it was on the,
in the board
Mr. Kalaki, I think it's in the
email that was sent out last week, but I do have hard copies if you'd like to review.
Oh, that'd be
it.
great. Thank you.
I believe it was the that one, and then in addition to that, it was the right. But this is the one with the there's an attachment to it, right?
Yes.
The proposal which we had seen with the packet that they had provided us. Do we have a copy of the proposal?
Sure. Would everybody like a copy of the proposal as well?
I believe that was part of the document, right? Yeah.
Everybody did receive it in a previous packet. Would you like another copy of it? I'd be happy to print them.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't need one. I'm good.
Has everyone had the opportunity to review? All right. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I was wondering if it would be appropriate to include maybe a brief clause in the contract that says if there's a conflict of interest that were to arise at any time in the search, that the district would be made aware of that. and that either the consultant would agree to either be removed from the search or put it up to the board to make a decision about how to handle the conflict.
All right, I don't have a problem with that.
Has our attorney already looked over this contract?
This is something we did not have the attorney review because we've had the same thing. You know, it's been the same one over and over and over again. So it's been very simple. So we haven't had an issue. They've all been standard.
So if we're going to add a clause in, can we agree to the language of that?
Yes, so what we could do, if we could put in a standard conflict of interest provision in there that says that if there is a conflict that they would notify, the Koski group would notify us of what that conflict is, and then it would be up to us to determine, you know, whether to stay, yeah.
So it's basically just a notification of conflict of interest.
Right.
Or depending on what the conflict is, if the consultant felt that they needed to remove themselves from the search.
But I think we need to define what that conflict of interest is, right? So Mr. Kalaki, what would you be talking about?
If any certain candidate that may have some sort of a relationship with the principals of the Koski group or the Koski group itself were to apply, then that may potentially be a conflict, as that candidate may be put forward as a viable candidate, and that I believe may be a conflict of interest. So, I mean, what we could do is we could just agree to the contract with the provision that the attorneys could contact the Koski group and work out agreeable language for a conflict of interest provision.
Okay, my only concern is how we define relationship, right? Because so many of all of these people know each other, meaning, you know, so how do we define relationship? I guess in my mind, if there's some kind of previous economic interest, that would be something, you know, that would be a conflict. But just because you know somebody, to me, would not be a conflict.
Well, as a matter of fact, many of the people that we would recommend consider to apply are the people we know. We have a little more reputation and
so I guess we're talking about, would that be, so Mr. Kalaki, more like a financial interest, right? Perhaps, right? Because
well, that might be one, but I'm just very interested in having a completely independent and completely credible search that invites candidates from near and far and can properly be vetted and have all of those candidates put forward so that they can be evaluated, rather than just a very specific group that perhaps members of the Koski group might know because they work in a very close geographic area to this district. For example, if there was somebody that, you know, that they somehow have a close relationship with of some kind. I mean, you know, conflict of interest provisions, I think, are pretty standard in contracts. And so I think particularly when we're looking for a superintendent and we're looking for a consultant to put forward all candidates as part of a search, rather than just a specific group that this consultant knows or has a prior relationship with, we'd want to make sure that we're getting information on all candidates. And so I think that that would be in line with a proper conflict of interest clause.
And that's our transparency as well as the paperwork.
So sorry.
I was going to say, so referring to the proposal in phase 3, you do propose to provide all applicant files to the entire board for the review in closed session and provide a report on all applicants, including those that you consider to be most highly qualified. So within your proposal, you do propose that you will be presenting all of the candidates. So I think there's two, it sounds like there's two different things. There's an issue of full disclosure, and then there's an issue of potential conflict of interest. which I think Mr. Kalaki, are you more concerned about the full disclosure or about the conflict of interest?
I'm concerned about potential and actual conflicts of interest.
I think though, for me, part of the fact that they have relationships with these superintendents was part of the reason why I felt more confident choosing the Koski group. I wouldn't necessarily want to negate the contract and it's entirely based simply on an existence of a conflict of interest, but I would want to know full disclosure if there is a prior relationship and what the nature of that might be, and if there are any economic interests, and then as a board, allow us the opportunity to decide next steps.
Well, what we can assure you is we would not bring forward a candidate that work economic, because we would consider that to be the service. But in terms of these prior relationships, we do know many people in the area that we would encourage you. We don't do the time to discuss the changes. If we have connection with before we know that, but we wouldn't want to necessarily not have to consider somebody because we know.
All right, so I think we as a group have to decide because we cannot proceed without agreeing to approve the contract. So if we don't agree to approve the contract, then we're going to have to come back here another day. So we're going to have to vote.
I would make a motion that we approve the contract with the addition of a conflict of interest clause, which would be worked out in language between the district's attorneys and the Koski group.
We currently already have a motion on the floor though.
Yes.
Then I would make an amended motion to approve this contract with the addition of a conflict of interest clause that is going to be crafted in language by the district attorneys and the Koski group.
But I think because we already have a motion on the floor that we are discussing, we have to vote on that motion and then you can vote on an amended motion.
No, actually, for the rules say that when there's a motion that's on the floor, an amended motion to be made. I've made the amended motion because I believe that the conflict of interest provision is extremely important, particularly when picking a superintendent for our district. And so that's why I've made the amended motion.
Okay, would someone like to make a second? Okay, there being no second, would someone like to make another motion?
Or do we just go back to the
Original motion, but I'm going to ask you to make the same motion again.
Well, then I would move to approve the contract as it is currently presented.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Ryan. All right. So I don't believe we need any further discussion. So none being had, we're going to call for a roll call vote. Mr. Kalaki?
Based on the absence of a conflict of interest provision, I vote nay.
Mr. Chang?
Yes.
Mrs. Chan?
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan?
Aye.
Mrs. Jack, aye. And the reason why I vote aye is because I believe, based on the assurances that have been made by the Koski group, that they believe that there was any financial incentive that would be considered a conflict for you. So you would bring that up to us. And then with respect to relationship, knowing or not knowing somebody, as Mrs. Chan said, I believe that's one of the reasons that we did hire you both, understanding that you have relationships with existing superintendents at this point. All right, with that understanding, the motion is passed, the contract is approved, so we will continue forward with this meeting. All right, now superintendent search discussion. So I invite both of you to discuss the various aspects related to the superintendent search.
Very good. Based on this last discussion, that if the attorney would still like to draft some language.
I think, Jill, that we've already agreed, we've already approved the motion, so we're just going to leave it the way it is.
I'm going to give you some handouts and explain what they are and how they're going to guide our discussion this evening. Most important one is I think you go that. But what we will require to that lead up to that. First, we want to go through the search process with you in detail. And by detail, we have what we have a tentative timeline that we're recommending. It's always subject to what the board decides, so it's subject to changes. But that timeline includes every specific event, including every meeting we would have with you and other key events leading up to the actual date of the appointment of the new superintendent. We find that level of transparency where you know exactly when everything is going to happen is critical from the very beginning. So we want to talk about that. We also want to talk about the various groups we wish to meet with, or focus groups, and give you an opportunity to perhaps even get some groups to the rest of the network.
Can I interrupt? Would you mind come close to the speaker
Use
for the
microphone?
audience benefit? Yeah.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
very good. And then we actually want to begin the process with the board that we're going to be using with each of our focus groups. And that's why we brought this chart paper and some markers, because we want to begin the process of developing the district profile, which will be used in the brochure and in all of our recruitment efforts. And that begins with our discussion with the board tonight. So before we proceed, any questions about that, what we hope to accomplish?
By the way, if you will develop any brochure, just prevent use the picture with the school student or kid, yeah. So prevent for unnecessary. Some the parent is very.
Well, we like to have the brochure be very inviting. And of course, we'd ask the board to take a look at it and tell us if you have any suggestions. But that becomes one of our chief advertising tools when we're ready to begin.
I think what Mr. Chang is saying is, certain students haven't signed off in terms of
Right.
having their photos taken. So
Exactly.
we just want to make sure that, you are very cognizant of that when making that brochure.
Yes. And we try to avoid including depictions of actual students for that reason.
Perfect.
Okay. So what I'd like to, in terms of going through this timeline, is begin at the end, because you'll see that everything that leads up to an assumption of when the board would hope to have your new superintendent on board, because that determines the timeline. We are making an assumption that you would like your new superintendent to be ready to start by July 1st. So tell us if that's correct.
Yes.
Good, because then everything fits the timeline based upon that. The next thing, kind of moving backwards in the timeline, is if we're going to have the new superintendent ready to start July 1, well, then when should that person be appointed? Bear in mind that the California Education Code requires that they be approved at a regularly scheduled board meeting, not a special board meeting. So we looked at your regularly scheduled board meetings preceding July 1, and we feel that June 14th is a little too late in terms of getting that person started by July 1. We feel the May 24th meeting is the appropriate one. Yes.
Can I ask a question? I've put a lot of thought recently into what the timing should be with regard to the new superintendent, particularly because in November, there's going to be a board election with 4 seats up. And so we may have there's a potential that you could have a superintendent that was selected by somebody or 4 people on a 5-person board that was not part of the board. If the board were to decide to potentially postpone this process or extend this process out longer so that the superintendent, the final decision could be made after a November election and a newly constituted board is instituted, could you speak to what those new timelines would be?
Well, not with exact dates, because we would have to determine if you wanted to wait until a new board was elected and in place, and usually that appointment doesn't take place till December, then this whole process would begin later, because this timeline is based on an assumption that even though there will be an election with possible changes on the board, that the current board wanted to make the decision and that the current board wanted the superintendent in place July 1. If that changes, then the new timeline would look very different. We would start considerably later.
So this process would not necessarily take longer. The process would just begin later.
The process really doesn't change in terms of the amount of time it takes, but when you begin is based upon when you want to end. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
But tell me if you still want us to work with the assumption of July 1 start date for the purpose of this timeline, because the dates that are in here are based on that.
I think for me, it's July 1. Mrs. Ryan?
July 1.
Mrs. Sean?
I actually would rather it be sooner than May. And I was going to ask if it's possible, is there any room to make this timeline sooner in terms of the appointment with a July 1st start date? Only because our school year ends that day, that week of May 24th. And so if we want to be able to have the community know by the time we leave, that feels a little bit late to me, but I also recognize that there are a lot of steps that need to be put in place.
I think as we work through this, we'll decide together where there might be room to move it up and where there isn't. And there are some parts where maybe we could, but one part that we don't want to really change very much is the amount of time for recruitment. We want to give that an adequate amount of time. So as we work through this, we'll see together whether there's an opportunity to move it up. It's going to be tight because we're getting a little bit of a late start in terms of to be done in May. So, but we'll see as we work through this. You tell us if there are things that you'd like to change.
Mr. Chang?
July 1.
Right.
What I'd like to see is potentially have some stakeholder meetings take place, gather input from stakeholders in the community as to what they think.
Yeah,
may be a good timeline for the appointment of a new superintendent. And if that information shows that there's a pretty clear statement that it may be preferable to wait until after November, then I'd like to explore that.
that's up to the board. It's not something that we normally ask stakeholders about the timing, because usually the timing has already been established. But if the board would
Right.
like us to include that question, we can.
Well, and we will get to that point, I guess, but it is a decision by the board as to when we hire a superintendent. So also I think, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joel, if we wait until the people who are elected, right, they were elected in November, they take office in December,
Correct.
right, or January, actually. And so they need to get up to speed, right? Because, and they should, if we are doing that method, then they need to, it would be another year, wouldn't it? Because we couldn't really start the process. I mean, they're not going to vote for somebody in January. That entire new board would have to do it. So I believe in terms of four of the school board members would like it by July. My only concern, Joel, is when you said that we're starting a little late, because when we interviewed everybody, all the search firms, they said we were ahead of most other school districts in terms of looking for a superintendent. And now you're saying that we're a little late?
Well, I think we're a little late if we want to appoint much earlier than the May 24th is what I'm saying. When you look at our timeline, it all falls into place with that as an ending point. But if we wanted to make it earlier, then we'd have to see where we could shave off some time. That's
and we have, right, I believe, had people, I mean, most contracts end June 30, right? Isn't that right for a superintendent?
Well, the superintendent's contract would end June 30, correct?
Right. So, but some have come earlier. In fact, even one of our departing superintendents had started a little earlier at his subsequent job. So, all right. So with that in mind, I think you have the direction.
Those are just the assumptions I want to begin with, which is if we want the person to start July 1, we don't believe we could do the appointment any later than May 24th. So the dates that we have in here are based upon leading up to that. And the dates go along with very specific actions. The very first action when you look at this timeline is right now, what we're doing this evening. We meet with the board to talk about the recruitment selection process. And we are together are going to, you will identify district strengths, district issues or needs, and desired characteristics of the superintendent. That's the most critical beginning of the process that we'll do this evening. Then we begin the process of meeting with the various stakeholder groups. And President Jack, I appreciate, we had a discussion earlier today that you already gave us some additional groups to include over and above the generic ones we had, which was very helpful. because now we have a very robust list to reach out to, and we may even find that you want to add some more.
Right. And as I said to you, right, it's not all inclusive or this is up to the board to decide, right, which stakeholders to interview, who to add, who to delete, whatever it may be, but it has to be a, majority board decision.
And I believe we have a good number to begin with. In some districts, the board identifies fewer, and some they identify more, but we have typically found that we meet with an average of about 15 different groups. And we also meet with certain individuals, including we want to meet with each of you individually, either in person or by phone, as you like, because we feel that you have the opportunity then to talk to us separately, not just as a whole group. So we have identified, and I made some changes from the one we originally sent in. So the timeline in front of you now is the most current one we're giving you. For between March 3rd and 15th, we hope we can get all of these meetings in. We're not so sure how soon we can start because we know that people need a little time to get their schedules ready. But we think some of the individual meetings in particular can be done sooner. And we will work with Mr. De La Torre to see which groups may be ready to meet a little sooner, which ones need more time. But we think between the 3rd and the 15th, we can get those meetings done. That's our assumption. Then the very next day, we will start preparing our report to you as we complete these meetings. But the very next day, we will have a report prepared to give you that has all of the input from every single group. And by the way, we put that down verbatim. We don't paraphrase. We put down exactly what everybody has told us. And we will have bolded the items that people say are the highest priorities, because it's easier if people say, these are things that are important to us, but these are our highest priorities. And then we will share that with you in light of what you've identified tonight and meeting with you. And we've got a couple of dates that we have put down as potential meetings. We will finalize the district profile, which becomes the brochure. So if we prepare that summary to you around the 16th, then we would like to choose either the 21st or 22nd for a special meeting for us to meet of March, to meet with you to finalize what goes into the brochure.
Right, so that meeting would have to be, our school board meeting on the 22nd is going to be moved up to the 21st. So I guess we could meet, is it possible to meet before our closed session at 6:30? How long do you think it would take?
I think that meeting is maximum of an hour.
Right, so if we had it at 5:30, that would be
sure.
All right.
Yeah. So do you want to choose the date right now?
I think we better because we don't have a lot of time.
Good. So will it be the 21st?
Mr. Koski?
Yeah, because that's a regularly scheduled meeting, right?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, I'm available March 21st at 5:30.
Oh, no.
Mr.
Chang and Mrs. Ryan have a
API, yeah, seminar.
yes. If you do the 16th, can we do the 18th? Friday or?
Well, I didn't put that down simply because it's a Friday, but that's fine with us.
Well, we may have to do it on that Friday. May have to do it on that Friday, I guess.
Or the Tuesday
I'm not going to be here. I'll be gone.
on the 15th?
Oh, I think they were thinking that they'd have the brochure done by the 16th.
Well, we would have our report to you by the 16th, but the brochure will be done after this meeting. Yeah, after this meeting.
So
the 16th is when the brochure is done and we're trying to find a meeting.
No, the 16th will be the report that we create of all of our meetings. The brochure will take place after we meet with you for you to use that information to help us finalize the
So the
profile.
meeting we're trying to determine is taking the report and turning that into a brochure.
Exactly.
You get to see the report and you might change your priorities
Right.
when you see what some of your stakeholders really felt was what they wanted. And so you get to see that and then revise the ones that you've already given us at the beginning. And then we use your revision for our brochure.
so I guess that really only, I guess that's the 18th is the only day, right then?
Do we know if we have closed session agenda items?
I think the earliest that Mr. Ryan, Mr. Chang can meet is what time?
It's not till 6.
Yeah, so
6 o'clock anyway. Okay.
I believe your meeting ends at 6, right? So that would be 6:30 would be the
Earliest.
yeah, would be the earliest. So
Can I suggest one other possible date? That if we wanted to include the 23rd as a possibility, we could.
I'm not going to, so I'm gone the entire week.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
And I don't want to delay the process. So
good.
So it's the 18th then?
I
We
guess
decided?
17th
6
is too
to
close.
8?
at what time?
17th, not good.
I'm going to be in
Oh,
an appointment.
So
So the 18th is difficult for me too, but it's the only date. So we'll do it then.
March 18th?
is it 6 p.m.? Time
Can
earlier?
we do it earlier?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be difficult for me. So no
Fine.
more than an hour,
That should be plenty.
5 to 6?
5 to 6. And
Okay.
Great. Okay. Now moving ahead, we can actually move a couple of dates up because we're meeting a few days earlier than we expected. So it said that we would be preparing the electronic brochure by the 23rd, but if we meet on the 18th, we can have that prepared by March 21st. So I'm going to move it up a little bit to see if that helps.
that's not the meeting to prioritize and finalize, right?
No,
That's our
we don't need to meet at this point.
okay.
So March 21st, we're not moving that time.
No,
Okay.
that's going to be March 18th.
But the date that I put is March 23rd on the top of the next page. We can do that as early as the 21st, which is to have the final copy of the brochure to send to you to review.
So we have a brochure. You'll get a copy of
Right.
that. And we start advertising.
but do we approve that?
That's an action item.
Well, no, it's not, because you're basically asking us to produce the brochure. We're just,
Oh, I
yeah,
see. Okay.
we're just giving you an opportunity to review it and make any suggestions.
All right. So perhaps you might change when you say approval, for us, it
Yeah,
means an action item,
Yeah.
right? So how about you just say board review?
yes, thank you,
And then board reviews application materials as opposed to.
thank you, yes. It is confusing, you're right. Then, instead of beginning the actual recruitment on March 24th, we would be ready to begin it on March 22nd, just a couple of days earlier, which is good.
I'm sorry, what date? That was, what day?
Yeah, we would just move up the recruitment on the second box down there to March 22nd, because we'd be ready to go. Now, the key thing is to have enough time in the recruitment period to really identify all the candidates that we would hope to apply, as well as let people on their own who wish to apply. What we have found is about 5 weeks is needed. So that's why we've gone from March 23rd to April 26th. And what you had mentioned, Mrs. Chan, is could we move the appointment date up earlier? The only way we could do that, and this is tricky, because if we moved it up earlier, it would have to be 2 weeks earlier for your prior board meeting, I believe. That means we'd have to shorten this recruitment period by quite a bit, from 5 weeks down to about 3. And I am concerned about that because I just don't think it gives people enough time to apply.
Okay, I agree with.
We have found the 5 weeks to be really about right.
Okay.
So that would take us to April 26th at the end of the recruitment. Now, let me explain a little bit about what we do during that recruitment phase. We don't wait till the very end to start checking references. As soon as application materials comes in, we immediately begin checking references on all the candidates so that we're not doing it at the last minute. By the time the application period ends, we're really just checking on the very last people to apply. And by the way, it's not unusual for some of your best candidates and many candidates to apply at the last minute. We find that often happens. But nevertheless, we're doing our work on checking all the references prior to that. Then as soon as they come in, we will bring you a packet of all the application materials of all of the candidates. And we'll bring it down here to the district office. It has to stay in the district office in a secure location for the obvious reasons of confidentiality. So what we then do is arrange a few days for board members to come in and review all those materials, all the application packets. And we would ask Mrs. De La Torre to figure out the secure location. But that would give you enough time to review them and take notes, and we'll give you a note-taking template that will help. And then we will be doing the same after we've already checked our references. We bring together a panel from the Koski group that helps us evaluate all these candidates' various strengths. And we put together our report, and we will identify typically candidates in 3 tiers. The lowest tier is those who we don't feel meet the minimum qualifications you're looking for, that they aren't at a standard that we would want you to even consider. The next tier would be those that have some strong recommendations, but we still don't think are necessarily strong enough to be your superintendent. And then the highest tier would be those that we think are most worthy of an interview, that meet all the qualifications at the highest level in terms of their experience, what they've accomplished, what you expect from your new superintendent. We find it helps for us to bring the information to the board that way. However, it frequently happens that the board says, thank you, but we would like to interview that person who you didn't put on your recommended list. Well, we don't want to interview that person that you put on the list. And that's fine, because you make the decision. But we find it's helpful if we give you our reasons why we think some candidates are your strongest based on all the homework we've done. Yes.
Can I just clarify all of these conversations around specific candidates that will be in closed session?
Yes, yes.
Will all be confidential in order to recruit applicants, right?
What you will see is on the very next page, it mentions the closed session meeting. Okay. When we get to that, we haven't mentioned the meeting yet, but the everything leads up to that meeting.
And we have had candidates that look strong, but when we check the references, we find something that really kind of, you know, crosses that out. And so we will put that on the chart so that you know the reason that they're not highly, you know, recommended.
We find there can be a big difference between paperwork and what we learn about candidates when we check references. Particularly when we like to dig very deep, and I could give you many examples of finding out information by talking to people that the candidate didn't even list as a reference that told us why we wouldn't recommend that person. So you need to hear that from us in a confidential setting.
And our trust is with the board, so we tell you everything.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Can I also ask, in your reference checks, do you also include looking at social media?
Yes.
Okay.
And background checks.
Yeah. Then when we get to a smaller list, we actually work with a firm who does intensive background checks beyond just social media. So we get that information too. Now, if you go to the next page, that meeting with the board to determine who you want to interview, we've given you 2 possible dates that we think would fit the best, May 2nd or 3rd. And that's because we want to hold the interviews on the very next weekend. So if there's one of those dates that seems to be better, we could make that decision now, or you could think about it.
Let's make that decision now.
Good.
We have a school board meeting on the 3rd. I thought it was, isn't it?
Which month?
10th? May.
May.
Oh, is it the 10th? It's the 10th. All right. Okay. Thank you. So then the 2nd or the 3rd, does anyone have a preference?
What are we doing? We're just in closed session at that point.
Mm-hmm.
That's the really interesting meeting in which you're going to decide who you want to interview. So we want to give perhaps up to 2 hours for that one.
And how much time will we have had before that to review all of the candidates?
Well, we will have the materials to you by the previous Wednesday. So you'll have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and if you need it, the weekend. So you would have anywhere, if you only need through Friday, that's 3 days. If you need the weekend, I'm sure that could be arranged to give you more days.
We just make a time adjustment and they can take 2 hours or 4 hours for what you want.
So does anyone have a preference for May 2nd or May 3rd in terms of their specific calendar?
So might I suggest the 2nd, because that gives us a little more time to contact the candidates and set up the interviews, if that works for you.
You wouldn't prefer the 3rd, which is Tuesday? Oh, I see.
Yeah.
You want a little earlier.
We want a
Okay,
little
I'm
more
fine.
time to notify the candidates.
Okay, is May 2nd all right with you, Mrs. Ryan, Mrs. Chung, Mr. Chang? All right, so it'll be May 2nd. And as you said, you need at least 2 hours, right?
We think it'll be about 2 hours.
All right, so Mrs. Ryan, 5 o'clock,
Okay, 5 to 7.
5 to 7 on Monday, is that all right?
Okay, great. Now, our next step is we notify, let me jump down one box beyond that to talk about when we would like to conduct the interviews. And again, this is all based on leading up to the May 24th appointment date. We usually do interviews on the weekend, and we typically will do the first round on a Saturday and the final round on a Sunday. But there is a conflict there. That Sunday is Mother's Day. That's not necessarily the best time to expect somebody to give up their time. So I'm suggesting that we do the first round on a Friday, and we could start in the late afternoon if you wish, go into the evening, and the final round that Saturday. So we could avoid Mother's Day. That would make the interviews on the 6th and the 7th.
What time would they run?
Well, it would depend upon how many candidates you select as to when we want to start. So if we're going to do it in the evening or even late afternoon, perhaps on Friday, perhaps we could start by about 4 o'clock.
So you're thinking the initial one will be on the 6th and then the final one will be on the 7th.
Right. And
I don't know whether that can.
that's because we want to avoid the 8th, which is Mother's Day. But if you'd like to do it on that Sunday, we could.
Start. Well, I would prefer not. I'm so sorry about Mother's Day. I would prefer not to do it on Mother's Day.
Here's another possibility. If you'd rather not do Friday night, but you'd rather do the first round on Saturday, we could do the final round on Monday.
I think that's too hard for the interviewees. So, or
agree.
we could do it. Well, I'm not the only mom here, but you gentlemen are not the only. I mean, you also have moms in your lives. So I'm fine doing it on Mother's Day late in the afternoon if you want, or so Friday, Saturday, or Saturday, Sunday. I'm okay myself. So I leave it up to, I'm going to start with Mrs. Ryan. Which would you prefer?
Friday, Saturday.
Okay, Mrs. Chang.
Friday, Saturday.
Okay, well, there you go, Mr. Chang.
Friday, Saturday.
Mr. Kalaki.
The same.
Okay, all right, so it's Friday, Saturday.
Okay, good. And again, the starting time would be determined by how many you choose to interview. We'll discuss that on May 2nd. So it's a 2-day process of interviewing and when we talk about interviewing, have any of you gone through this process before, have been on the board? Okay. So I just want to clarify, we don't do the interviewing, you do. We will work with you when we meet on the 2nd to select the interview questions and the format, but our job is to facilitate it, schedule the times, bring the person in, but you do the interviewing. I want to be clear about that. We're not the questioners.
Are you in the room?
We're in the room usually, but that's up to you. But usually it's helpful for us to be in the room so that we can kind of monitor the process, make sure we don't go over that kind of thing.
So that would be our decision as a board. Okay.
Also, we have not had those interviews here for the specific reason is that people know who's coming in and out. So we're going to have to make arrangements to find another
location.
Yeah, another location.
And that's easy to do. Yeah. Then for the final interview, which is the very next day, and usually you're down to a couple of candidates or sometimes even just one, we've had those in a variety of places. Sometimes boards have liked to make it very informal and they'll do it in one of the board members' homes. Sometimes they'll do it here. Sometimes they'll do it in another location similar to where we're going to hold the first round. So that you have time to think about that. But by May 7th, you will have determined who your successful candidate is. Then we will have already begun working on, but we will complete a compensation study for you, telling you what contracts for superintendents in similar size and similar districts are. We find that to be helpful for the board to have that information. And we'll have that to you maybe sooner, but no later than May 13th. What we'll also do is work with you and the candidate to set up a date for a site visit. Usually either a subcommittee or the entire board would like to go visit the district that this person is currently working in and talk to people there and make sure that no stone has been unturned and they really learn from the people they work with. And we call that a site visit. And most boards want to do that, not all. But if you do, we'll make the arrangements with you as to when you want to do that.
Right. And I think that's a board decision, right? But if I recall, in every superintendent search, the entire board has gone. So
when people have asked us, we suggest that's the best way to go, but it's up to you. You make that site visit, and then we're getting into the point that I can't pin down exactly how long it'll take, but we think we've given us adequate time to negotiate and finalize the contract. Because once you've said, yep, everything looks good from the site visit, we're working on the contract, we're working with our attorney on our side, we're working with the candidate to give us input. Sometimes that can go very quickly and sometimes it takes a little longer. But that's why we wanted to be prepared, because for a board meeting on May 24th, I believe you'd have to have that contract ready to go on your agenda by May 20th, which is the Friday previous to the board meeting. So we think of that's your deadline really, is May 20th to have a written contract that everybody's agreed to. And that should give us enough time.
May I ask a question? I've never gone through any of this before, but I know that there's always that like complicated, tricky period where you have a final candidate, but you haven't yet done the contract. And then sometimes the cat is let out of the bag, either on purpose or on accident, and announcements are made. What does that, is that sort of a strategy? Is there a strategy in place at some point that we look at?
Well,
or?
our belief and our strategy is to not let the cat out of the bag. We believe in confidentiality right up till the time of the appointment. Because,
which would be the agenda posted.
Oh, when you agendize the contract, then you're letting people know. So when we say right up to the time of the appointment, it's when the agenda is published.
Okay, so that's sort of our expected target date for the announcement
yes.
to be made. Okay, thank you.
And we keep the candidate informed of that as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, there's a couple of boards we work with that have said, since it's going to be public at the time that the contract's on the agenda, we would just as well be happy to make an announcement right around that time. But most boards have just said, we'll make the announcement at the board meeting. That's your choice. That's, it doesn't become official until you approve it at the board meeting. So that's basically our choice. The other thing we'll do for you, so we will help you with contract negotiations to the extent that you want us to. Some boards like us to be involved at every step. Some boards have said, it's okay, we'll work with our attorney and directly with the candidate, and that's your choice. The other thing that we offer to do is to write up the press release on the candidate so that you can use that for notifying the public of your candidate and their background, et cetera. And then the last piece, obviously, is May 24th, which would be the appointment. Now, Mrs. Chilton, the problem I see is I can't see how we can cut this short to move it up 2 weeks. That's what I'm struggling with. So we kind of try to squeeze it in there just to have it ready for May 24th.
Right, because it's that need to approve in open session that really locks us into those.
We have a responsibility to do that.
And I need to tell them too about.
Yeah, please do.
I want to be perfectly transparent. I will be out over to Greece at the time of the interviews. Okay, so I will not be there, but I'll be doing, no checking on their paperwork, checking on the credentials, all of that I'll be involved in. I will not be there.
Yeah, prior to us being involved, there were some vacation plans that were made. That, that's just something to work with. But I will be glad to work twice as hard on the interview time because you won't be able to be there. Now, anything that happens between May 24th and July 1st would be up to you and the candidate, whether they can start earlier. That becomes problematic simply because you can't have two superintendents at the same time. And your current superintendent is on a contract that ends June 30th. But somebody can always come in an unpaid status and do a transition time if they're available. So, and that's happened quite often. But we think it takes about a month of transition time for the candidate from their current position. They're usually in a position of very high responsibility, either currently a superintendent or assistant superintendent. And so we figure they will be quite busy finishing up the work in their current position and then ready to go July 1. So that would be the timeline. Have we taken care of all the adjustments we have to make on that? Good. Well, wonderful. Then the next thing where I wanted you to take a look at is this list, which again, we said is not exhaustive, but it's gotten better than the way it started out, of potential groups that we would meet with. These are focus groups. And focus groups, the size really varies depending on how many people could be in the group and how many people show up. We've met with groups of 30 to 40, and we've met with groups of 2. So it just depends. But when they're listed as groups, we like the interaction of people in a group setting. Those are scheduled to go no more than an hour. We've got them down to where we usually finish them at 55 minutes, so that if we did one at 10 and we have the next one scheduled at 11, we're ready to go. And we work through the process. And it's been very successful. People feel the key thing is to get people's ideas, but also have them feel they were really heard. And we've been very successful in that regard. So looking at this list, please tell us if there are groups that should be added or individuals that should be.
What's the criteria we're looking for?
Well, we start out with what are the most common groups that are likely to have a voice, likely to have input into who's going to be the new superintendent. And often you're dividing it into 3 different kinds of groups. You'll have groups of staff, different groups of staff. You'll have groups of parents, primarily parents, and you'll have groups of community members who are not necessarily parents, and they may be connected with a city government or a service club or another club in the community. So those tend to be the 3 categories of groups. And we find that we want to include everybody that you think has a voice, has something to share with us.
A couple of groups then, and I think they're sort of, the problem with San Marino is many people overlap. Right. In a lot of these capacities. But a couple of groups per se would be, that's not on here, is East meets West. And they're not exclusive to San Marino, but they do include some San Marino people.
Say the name again.
East meets West.
East meets West, okay.
And then also, and this is where Mrs. Jack would be helpful to me to delineate the distinction between them, but there's the SMCYAA, SMCAA, and then San Marino Little League. And I know that convenient enough, it's the same person this year who's doing both of those.
Now, would that be more talking to an individual in leadership or talking to a group of people?
Well, that's why I'm not sure exactly how that works.
So,
Some stakeholders that come to me.
Oh yeah, they can come. Yeah. Yeah. If somebody's a member of more than one group, they can come to as many of these meetings as they want.
I think that's a very good point, and I do agree because Brent Valvato is, the president for both SMCA and San Marino National Little League this year, but he may be an individual member you may want to meet, just because the Little League board isn't as cohesive. But that's something you might want to contact him. Good. And he could tell you, right? I'd like to bring my entire executive board, or whatever.
Well, that's a good idea. We can ask him what he prefers,
right,
to meet with us individually or bring his group with us.
Right. And then another group, and I don't know, again, I don't know what's usually included in these, but the high school and the middle school have booster groups. So, and again, there's a lot of overlap. So I'm not quite sure how this works in terms of if you identify someone in what capacity they are communicating their thoughts.
I would say if you feel the booster group is composed of people who are not likely to be part of the PTA or other parent meetings, then it's worthwhile to meet with them separately, because they probably will want to be heard.
And they're pretty active.
Yeah. So in some places, they're the same people who would be involved in the groups of PTA or other parent groups. But if it's a distinct group, then they probably deserve a separate meeting.
How many booster groups?
Well, I know there's TAB, Titan Athletic Boosters, and then there's VAPA Boosters. I don't know how the middle school boosters operates. I don't know if they have an umbrella organization over them or not.
Well, we can find out.
And again, all of them overlap with each
Yeah,
other.
they do. They do. So I'm just, my only concern,
Right.
and I agree with you, right, is if we get down to the booster groups, though, my concern is that we're now going to bog the process down and we're never going to be, not never, but you know what I mean?
It gets
Right. And so
cumbersome.
many of the TAB people are also, I mean, they're part of, you know, Little League or, you know, SMCAA. And so.
Well, we're happy to leave a group out if you recommend that.
You mean include a group?
Or leave them out. In other words, if you say it's not necessary, that's okay too.
So all the group, the name appear on here, and also the group you mentioned, is that they will get together. So how many times?
He'll meet, they'll meet with them for
Individually
1 hour
or what?
apiece. Yeah,
1 hour.
1 hour piece. Mrs. Ryan?
Last time we had student leadership, ASB, and I thought they were really vital because I wanted to hear the student perspective because they are the ones that have the experience in terms of their receiving the school experience. So the leadership of our school district would be very important.
And they're on the
setting
list.
that tone. So they're on the list?
They're
Oh, I didn't see
just
them.
a couple up from the bottom on the first page.
Oh, so I messed it
Student
up.
leaders,
Okay,
yeah.
student leaders
Yeah.
is your ASB.
Right.
And then the library board also has foundation, trustees, and friends. There's 3
Library
groups
board?
there.
Okay.
So please include them as one package. So it'd be foundation, trustees, and friends.
Library board, foundation, trustees, and friends. Okay.
Yes.
What she's saying is they're all related to the library, so just.
Right.
Yeah, the one group.
Is the Chinese Club of San Marino and the Chinese School of San Marino a fairly overlapping group?
Actually, it's the same one group, yeah. So the Chinese school, the committee is also the board of directors. So I think I just put the one, yeah.
Put one.
So just Chinese Club?
The reason why I was asking was, so the Chinese school has a separate principal, right?
They have a pay principal first
Yes.
time, yeah.
So I was wondering if she might be like an individual for them to talk to, or do you think that should be part and parcel? You think it should be, you know more, so Chinese club / Chinese school?
I think they're all just, they just one person have a dual role.
Okay, so let's combine them. So it'll be.
The Chinese club and the Chinese club and the Chinese school.
Could be one.
Good. Combining works well for us. We find that if you can get more people at a meeting, it's good because they really kind of get to work with each other. So it's helpful. It's helpful. Whenever you can combine groups and get more people, it works well.
Yeah, maybe if we put them together.
How about if, maybe just for the high school? How about one meeting where all the boosters, they're like 3 segregated ones. There's one for athletics, there's ones for art, and there's one for, there are a lot of booster groups.
Well, there's
Well, there's
VAPA, but there's also
robotics.
speech and debate, which
Right.
is,
So speech and debate falls under VAPA though.
well, I understand, but it's kind of
So
got its own
robotics.
separate group is what I'm saying. So I mean, yes, you're right in thinking that there's a lot of separate individual boosters that may fall under bigger umbrellas.
Maybe just do one high school boosters then.
Right, so why don't you contact Mr. Kirkenbaugh, who is the high school principal, and say that you would like to have an hour meeting with all of the boosters, and then, you know, it could be VAPA, it could be speech and debate, it could be, you know, all tab, it could be all.
We'd ask him to include as many people from
Right,
the various groups.
exactly. At least provide you, you know, with the information so you can invite as many people as you want, and we'll see who ends up coming.
I will tell you, this is already one of the most robust lists we've had, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't add anybody, but you've got good representation here.
No,
You've got very good representation.
I think this is all really, I think they're, it's really good. The Library Foundation, I didn't remember. And the boosters, I think, are really good. And the SMCA. So any additions to this list, or is it pretty exhaustive?
Would it be helpful to get some input from somebody maybe connected with PCC?
We could, yes.
Our trustee?
Right, so
From-
why don't
from
we
where?
include that? Right. PCC will give you the name of the individual.
Okay. So that would be likely to be just an individual trustee
Yes,
representing this area.
right, it could, yes.
Okay, good. Good. This is an important time because we want to finish this process with everybody saying we were heard. Now, included in this, and we'll work with Jennifer, is a community forum for people who didn't necessarily belong to one of these groups or couldn't attend that meeting. And that would be, you all come to a meeting, and that's held in the evening, and we'll figure out the best location and the best date for that. And the other thing that we gave you is a copy of what our typical survey looks like that we would ask the district to post, and you might be helping us with that, to post on the website. And we would also provide hard copies that would be in the superintendent's office for people who prefer to work that way. But these are for people who might not make it to a meeting or might make it to a meeting and still want to put their responses down in writing. And when we report back to you on everything we've heard, we include the survey information as well as the booster group, as the focus groups rather. So that's how we gather information. And I think given all the groups we've identified, we should have a good report for you in terms of who we've heard from.
It's a big
And,
report.
yeah, what they have to say.
We write everything down.
Yeah,
Very
you'll see it all, and then it'll
Somebody
be,
says, is my comment on there? It's
Yeah.
yours.
then it'll be helpful. The only thing we encourage people to do is not be negative about people. There's one question that we're going to start with tonight about what are some of the problems or critical needs. And often, you know, you're talking about issues, but we don't like to talk about people, individuals by name.
And one of the things that we should go to is when we conduct these, it might be like the PTA booster. And so they do not sign in. We don't know their name. So they feel very comfortable, you know, telling us what they're feeling.
Yeah.
What kind of input they want. Because we have no idea what their name is. So when we get that, we'll say parent boosters, and we might say 20 people were there, and then we list all the names.
In fact, when we give you our report, we don't even identify the group by name. We'll say group A, group B, group C, because they feel better if it's not connected with a particular, if the comments are not connected with a particular.
Right, I mean, to the extent, right, that we can do that. We have about 20 minutes before Dr. Choi has.
Well,
to
we're going to
leave.
hurry up through this and the
All
best
right.
we can, but this is the meat of the process. Let's see, can we do it?
Ms. Jack,
Yes.
can we include the past school board member?
Yes, I think that's a great
And
idea.
also the major donor for school foundation.
Mhm. Yes, we'll talk to the foundation about that. How's that?
Yeah.
Because I believe some, okay, we'll talk about that.
No, please.
I'm sorry, Joel, I think we need to add 2 more to the list. Mr. Chang is absolutely right. We'd like to include past school board members.
Okay. Very good. And are we likely to talk to them individually, you think?
Or in a, it doesn't matter, whatever you feel
Okay.
is appropriate. And then we'll give you a list, you know, of the ones that are still living in this community, right?
Good.
Maybe the last 12 years.
Good.
And then we will also, Mr. Chang suggested major donors to the foundation, but that may be something you may want to talk about with the foundation first to see whether or not.
I think it also may be helpful if the foundation, in preparation for their meeting, would reach out to their major donors if that's what they chose was appropriate and get input and then relay it as part of their comments, of the foundation's comments.
Yes, or maybe meet separately. Either way, we'll let them hammer it out. How's that?
Okay. Good. All right, well, thank you. Now, this is actually the most fun part of the night for us. And we hope for you. We start the process by asking you the exact same questions that we will ask each of these groups. But it's your input that's most important because eventually you're going to be making a decision on what you consider the most important. First question is, it's all brainstorming, and then we'll come back and do some. This becomes very important because when we do the brochure, We want to tell everybody why they want to come. Why it's a great place. So let's brainstorm. We should go on that list.
Our parents.
Our teachers.
Anything specific you want to say about the teachers in terms of experience, expert?
Their dedication to put students first.
Our students tend to be lifelong learners. They are curious. They are unique in that their drive, their motivation, who they are is really representative of what San Marino is all about.
So I will say lifelong learners, highly motivated.
Yeah.
Supportive community.
Good.
Well, for the parent, they are acting as a volunteer, like a PTA. Yeah,
Strong volunteers.
strong, yeah, strong volunteer.
Engaged,
Strong volunteer
engaged,
group.
Yeah,
engaged parents.
When we say volunteer,
I think that would be under parents, no?
well, they might include parents, they might include others, so we can say strong group of volunteers. Are they all parents? I'd say parents and others.
Yeah.
So could we put what Mrs. Chan said under parents, though, that they're very engaged?
They're very engaged.
Up at the top where you have
at
parents?
the top.
We should say that they're very engaged.
Parents,
Up at the
parents
And
engaged.
are they supportive as well?
Yes.
For the most part, parents
Yes.
are engaged and supportive.
I would say engaged, supportive, and generous
Good, good.
Yeah.
with their time and
Resources.
resources. Didn't want to say.
Resources.
Now,
They are
sometimes
here.
in strengths, people identify some specific programs or specific facilities that stand out, so that
We have our Caltech and our Huntington High School partnership courses. Actually, you can add PCC to that. So we have, I know, how would we group them? Sort of-
Like collaborative partners,
There we
maybe, or something?
Are there other partnerships besides those two?
Yeah,
Pasadena
road.
City College.
Yeah, Rotary supports our students.
PCC, Caltech.
Huntington Library. We already
That
said
would
that.
be, yeah, curriculum. And then we have other.
Good. Anything else about the programs or facilities or anything?
We're the #1 school district.
I think that's important.
Mhm.
#1 school district in the state.
Yes. I don't use those rankings anymore, though.
We are for the brochure.
And when we say that, you're talking primarily based on student performance. Right?
Yes.
We have a very good reputation.
Oh, yes.
In a small district, you have
We're a very tight-knit community.
Safe environment for the
Mhm.
superintendent,
Yes, very
future
safe.
superintendent.
Yeah, very safe.
Yeah. Safe environment for the students, the teachers.
there's no back to it, that's what it's
So
called.
it's an excellent reputation, tight-knit community.
It's safe, safe community.
Safe.
Safe community.
Okay, tight-knit and safe community.
That works.
Let me ask you this, would you consider the technology available to students to be at a high level?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So would that be under technological resources?
Well, it could be a lot of ways to say it. So strong technological resources in general. Okay.
Dr. Choi,
We have a-
what would
yeah, I
you
was
say?
gonna
I
say
know.
we
How
have
would
a-
you
we
put
have
it,
a
Dr.
strong-
Choi?
We have a strong technology assistant superintendent. What does he think about our?
Strong tech resources.
A lot of things like innovation and
Strong technological resources fuels innovation.
Fuels innovation, good.
That would be Dr. Choi.
I think we've shown in the last couple of years our ability to be flexible and nimble when we need to be. And there's been a lot of work in aligning. Because we are small, we are able to align and be consistent. And also allows us to focus on all of our learners.
How would we say that? You know, we can focus on all of our learners.
Yeah, I don't know how would that work?
Well, we address diverse learning needs, right?
Oh, there we go. There's the edgy speak. Yeah, exactly. There's the edgy speak. Further right on.
Could we say address, what did you say?
For a small school district, we have the unique ability to address diverse learning needs of all students.
Excellent, okay.
I think it's easier to do that. When you're done with that, I'll just go to the next.
I apologize for my unique ability to address diverse learning needs of students.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is maybe a little too specific, but what Mrs. Chan said, you know, we have been flexible. We've been able to pivot, especially in the COVID realm where we have been, you know, I think we've been in the forefront of making sure that, you know, our students are protected, our teachers are protected. But how do we put that in there? Or is that too specific, Jill?
How is the vaccination rate?
I'm not sure. I think we could say our district has been particularly responsive during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah, support measures for COVID too.
I think that's also one of the positives of our teachers is that they were very dedicated to our student well-being
I think that's absolutely
and
correct.
success during this process.
And flexible.
Mhm.
And
Right.
teachers had to be
And
flexible.
maybe we put in that, you know, to your point, maybe, you know, with a strong collaborative effort with the teachers and staff in making sure that health and safety of our children were paramount.
Strong collaboration, would you say between teachers and administrative staff? Or
Right, teachers, administrative staff, and also classified staff is what
I
I'm
will
talking
say among all staff.
So all staff really.
about. All staff and teachers,
Mhm.
Right.
all staff, administrators and teachers.
Focus on the safety of students.
Primary importance, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, on the top of you mentioned teachers, is there anything you want to say about any other staff, such as classified or administrators?
I think that, you know, we've had, because of the work environment, our classified staff, you know, the longevity.
I was just gonna say, do you have longevity?
Yeah, we
both
have
in
longevity for
classified
teachers and
certificate?
classified. right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then the other thing I have to say, obviously, is that we believe that we are strong in all three A's, right? Academic, arts, and athletics. And I think that's really important that we, you know, try to focus on all three.
Activities. Was it arts?
Arts and
Academics.
athletics. Arts and athletics,
Activities is the fourth. So yeah,
academic, arts and athletics. The 3 A's.
What did we say about diverse? Diverse need, did we say anything about being a diverse,
learners.
about being
A
diverse
diverse
though? A
community.
diverse community?
And that goes into your school too. I mean, that goes into the school.
You want to add supportive and diverse community?
Mhm.
Do we have a good enough list for us to do some prioritizing, or do we want to add some more things?
Like for the sake of time, we may.
You may find you're adding more things when you see the results of what everybody else has said too. So you don't have to have everything yet, because you'll be hearing some more things.
Right, this isn't exhausted. This is kind of a first crack at it, right?
So this is just the first.
You get the first and you get the last, once you see what everybody else said too. So
Now,
that's
to do
nice.
this next part, sometimes we actually give people markers and have to come up and check a certain number. But I'm going to try it a different way, just so you don't have to get off. That is, we give you a certain number of votes, and you get to spread those votes around among these items. And then we'll just tally the ones that get the most votes.
Isn't it? It's hard to
So,
see.
how about if we just say that from this list, you get to vote on your top 6? Set priority. Figure out which ones you think are the most important. And then I said, go through these, and you raise your hand, remember you're going to get a total of 6 votes. And we'll see how that works.
So we put the number 1 beside what we think is most
No, I'm
important,
just
then
gonna
a
ask you to raise
2.
your hand. In other words, when I
Oh.
say,
Raise your
you
hand.
if you get 6, if I say you get 6 votes, and I name one, you decide, is that one of my top 6? And that way it helps us to kind of say they're all important, but some of them stand out as the group's priorities.
Okay.
So, can we do that now? Okay. So let's start with the very first one. Parents are engaged, supportive, and generous. How many vote for that as a high priority? Teachers are dedicated. Students are lifelong learners and highly motivated. Supportive and diverse community. Strong group of volunteers, including parents and others.
I really think that that kind of falls under the first one though, too.
This one.
I agree. Why don't we just make sure we combine it with the first one? Included number 1. That makes sense. High school partnerships with Huntington Library, PCC, Caltech, others. Number 1 school district in the state based on student performance. Okay. Excellent reputation. Tight-knit and safe community. Strong tech resources that fuel innovation. Ability to be flexible and nimble with lots of alignment in the system. Unique ability to address the learning needs, diverse learning needs. I've been particularly responsive during the pandemic among all staff and teachers to focus on student safety. Longevity of teachers and classified staff. And strong in academics, arts, and athletics. Okay. Now remember, this is just the first shot at it. You'll be making some changes by the time we do a final version. But I would say the priority is 3 or more votes. So today, these are the ones that I will type up what you've told us, and I will bold the ones that have 3 or more votes. Say for today, these are the highest votes. Change next time here for the rest of the community. Now, I will take this down. And we'll go on. What are the critical issues or needs facing the district? Yeah. And another way to say it is, what are the biggest problems we're dealing with?
Finances.
And when we say finances, I'm assuming there are not enough. Finances are low. Some districts have too much money, they don't have to spend it.
Declining enrollment.
Yeah, they kind of go together. Finances, but a separate one, a separate one. Declining enrollment.
They do kind of go together, but declining enrollment adds additional complications with.
I would identify them as 2 separate items from that. What else would be an issue that the district is dealing with that hasn't been?
COVID is an issue, is it?
The pandemic? Yeah. I don't think there's a district in the state or anyone that would say it's not.
Our facilities and potentially the need for a bond.
So our facilities in need of upgrading?
Yeah.
How we're saying they need to be upgraded? And a potential need for a bond? Yes.
Frequent renewal of a parcel tax.
Reliance on the parcel tax.
Rely on parcel tax.
I'm sorry, reliance on.
On our
Parcel
parcel tax
tax.
and
Oh,
donation,
reliance on the parcel tax.
and donations for that
And
matter.
donations. Because the district receives not only the parcel tax, but a lot of money in donations.
So I guess reliance on the community.
Local
right?
funding.
Yeah, reliance on local funding, which includes the parcel tax donations. That's never a comfortable place to be because you can't depend on it. You have to go out and work for it every time.
Soft money.
Any issues regarding staff that need to be considered?
Turnover at the high school.
Turnover of staff at high school?
Why do you think that is?
I'm sorry.
Why do you think that is, that you have a turnover at the high school? I'm just wondering.
You mean particularly in the counseling staff? Or-
Yeah, and I was just thinking that, I'm thinking more in the counseling and, I mean,
Administrators?
There could be a lot of reasons.
yeah, it's, and I'm not
Sometimes
even,
people come to a job and realize they're not, that's not the right job.
and I'm not even, and I'm thinking actually more than high school, Valentine had a lot of turnover as well. And
So
then,
not only at the high school.
so I guess turnover in staff in general, because we are going to be hiring 2 new principals. So,
And that's not only a San Marino issue, we're seeing that in a lot of places. Their teachers have moved on for various reasons. Unfortunately, a lot of people left the profession.
I think more movement in education really was.
What are other issues that you see as something the new superintendent will have to deal with?
Well, one of the critical issues has to be with the continual professional development of our staff, because whether you're at the administrative level, you're at the faculty level or certificated level, even the way in which we deliver education has to be examined, because previously we had pull-out programs, now we're doing push-in programs. Previously, we had services delivered to our special ed students. Now, how are we doing it? Because we need to continue to train our staff to take action and to have deliverable services for our students. So the better we are at that craft, the better we are able to develop that experience for our students.
So PD for staff needs to be designed to meet the needs of our students.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what good PD does.
Yes.
Designed to meet the needs of students.
Mhm.
You mentioned specifically regarding special ed. Is there a particular need to upgrade services in special ed?
Yes, there always is. All right. That's our high need population,
We can upgrade
as well as our English language learners.
As well as English. Okay.
Mhm.
Need to upgrade special ed student needs. And then I would put the EL students together.
I think some of the learning loss
Oh, yes.
due to the pandemic,
Learning loss due to the pandemic, big issue. Yeah.
both social and academic.
Social
The learning
and
loss, social and academic.
social and academic. And in fact,
You know what, I think also there are, also their well-being too.
Mhm.
there-
Mental health, social emotional learning.
That's been an issue. I'm on the board of a mental health service agency in another city, and the failure of referrals we've had for students who were depressed, considering suicide, it's never been this high. Any other issues that we need to be aware of because your new superintendent will have to address it?
I think that, well, I guess it would fall under turnover, but sort of the linked issue of having to lay off teachers because of the financial problems and the instability that's created on our teaching staff.
To teacher layoffs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, that's related to finance, but it's a very particular problem.
And part of that, that's a fairly big issue, but part of that issue is also morale of the staff. They have lost close friends and coworkers.
Do you have issues with collective bargaining among your associations, your teachers and classifiers? Can they be difficult to?
No.
Not so much.
Compared to other school districts, I think it's okay. I think the superintendent need to advocate the 3A balance. The academic also athletic, yeah, need to continue.
Put that in there for the superintendent.
Yeah.
Do you think your staffs are competitive to recruit staff?
We're a small school district, so I mean, we're trying to do the best that we can, so.
I want to say something.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I would say we have a very lean district and administrative staff at our school sites as well. So I would say lean administration.
Lean administrative staff overall. Are there particular issues among the community that
I don't think this can make the top whatever, but there are issues with respect to the city. And I know, they've also talked about our district in terms of things that we can't control, which is pensions and the cost of that in terms of, increasing our budgets and what that means to us.
So did you just say issues between the city and the district?
No, it's not the city, it's community members. Maybe we just don't put that in there. The city has nothing to do with us in terms of pension.
In the community?
Pardon?
Is there tension in the community at large?
I think it's more with the city and
Any other areas of need, specific need, or critical issues?
I think, I'm not sure if this would make it on the list or if it's too broad, but I feel, and this is sort of reflective of what's happening everywhere, is there's sort of a polarization and there's a lack, there's such a divide, there's such a, I don't know what the word is, an inclination to stand on one side and not necessarily find a middle compromise or collaboration.
That's probably happening everywhere.
Yeah, that's why I'm not.
Polarization within the community on many issues. And we've seen that in the last couple of years connected to politics and other things. Yeah. Used to be easy for people to get together and talk about things. Now it's not so easy. There is often a lack of civility and
Communication norms.
Okay. Anything else to add, or should we do the prioritizing? This time there are fewer items, so instead of 6 votes, let's have 5 each. We'll each vote for the ones 5 you think are most critical.
Finance?
First one is finance issues. Okay, that's 5.
Stay off like that.
Right at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Declining enrollment. Okay. 4. 4.
Oh, I saw 5. Was it 4?
The issues related to the pandemic, social, academic, learning loss, well-being. Okay. Facilities need upgrading, possible need for bond.
Sorry, 5. Yeah.
5.
Sorry, late hand.
Too much reliance on local funds, partial tax and donations.
But I think that's part and parcel of finances, I mean, because that's,
Let's connect that to
Yeah.
the. They go together.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's-
Turnover of high school staff and staff at other schools as well. Professional development needs to be designed to meet the needs of students. 3. We need to upgrade services to special ed and English learners. 2. There's been instability due to teacher layoffs. Okay. And staff morale is a concern. Very lean administrative staff at the schools and the district. 3. And polarization within the community. 3. So again, anything with 3 or more will get in that case.
Yeah.
This one is basically, let's create the perfect superintendent. And the one thing that isn't really practical is to say they walk on water. But what are going to be the most critical qualities? And by qualities, we mean both personal and professional. To be the kind of leader that this district needs. New superintendent. What comes to mind?
communication skills.
Good communicator?
The ability to see both the micro and macro perspective.
Somebody that truly embraces and promotes diversity and inclusion.
Inclusion.
And diversity and equity.
Equity.
Why don't you just write DEI?
If we all understand that, I'll put that down. Good. What else?
Pay attention student interests and develop
I'm not sure about that. Pay attention to.
Focus on student
or focus
interest.
on student.
Focus on students.
Okay.
We'll say that's gonna be high on the list.
The reason I think when you're trying to have to choose the candidate is very important because this community is very special. So then the kid, most of the from the K to 12. So then and several generations still live here. So the superintendent need to understand the community citizen mentality.
I would say let's add that. Needs to understand the community.
Would that also include the invisible in the community?
Okay.
Invisible in the community.
Visible in the community.
Yes.
And that's a little different from understanding. You want somebody who is out there, well known, goes to the events.
Also for me, an academic leader, and financial expertise. We've always gone from one to the other and we've never had both. I shouldn't say that. I didn't mean we didn't have both, but we've had, the strengths have been a little more.
Both important.
I would like to see somebody who is flexible and open-minded.
I think that because a lot of people come to this community for the high academic standards of our schools, we should have somebody with a strong curriculum background.
I think I'll add curriculum and instruction. Okay? In terms of the person's background, I'm going to assume, tell me if I'm right, you want somebody who's got a high level of district leadership. Maybe they've been a superintendent, but if not, at least a very high level district leadership. Is that correct?
Yes. Because unless you've worked in a district, you have no idea how it operates, whether it's large or small.
Sometimes we get candidates who apply who are principals. They're not prepared. What else do we do?
Somebody collaborative.
I'm assuming that you want somebody with a strong work ethic. They'll be here early, they'll work late, they'll be here on weekends when they need to. Superintendent is not a 9-to-5 job. Maybe 9 a.m. to 5 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
The superintendent should be innovative, a problem solver, one that can engage the community in working together side by side rather than being divisive or dismissive.
Right. Seems to be very important. I'm going to guess you want somebody who's going to make a long-term commitment to San Marino, not somebody who just expects to be here for a couple of years. What else? Or have we hit on the most important thing?
I think we're good, Jill. So if we
Okay,
could.
good.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's
again, we
number
don't have a lot on the list. That many. No, even so, I'm going to say let's vote on 6. This is a tough one because I think they're all important. Nevertheless, the 6 you think are most important. Starting with good communicator. Have a micro and macro perspective. 3. Promotes and embraces DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
1.
Focus on students.
5.
Needs to understand the community.
4.
Visible in the community.
1.
An academic leader with financial expertise.
4.
Flexible and open-minded.
2.
A strong background in curriculum and instruction.
Wouldn't that be part of the academic leader part of it?
Okay, let's put that together. I think.
Yeah, that goes well. That does go well with that.
put that together. Thank you. Has a high level of district leadership experience.
2.
Collaborative.
1.
Has a strong work ethic.
1. 2. 2.
Innovative, problem solver, can engage the community and working together.
3.
Will make a long-term commitment to the district.
You know, Joe, here's the thing. Those are all important to me, right? And we're limited to voting for 6, right?
I know.
And I think,
Can I get 2 more?
the reason why I didn't vote for the other isn't because I didn't think it was important. It was just, you know, we're trying to prioritize, and all of those things I think are vitally important for.
I think some of us voted for more than 6.
I'm
looking
looking
at
at voted for all of them.
Yeah,
Like,
I looked at
If he's
the
going to
stars.
follow his 3 and up rule, you're going to get most of them, but it does help give sort of a prioritization to some extent.
See too, with as many stakeholders as we're meeting with, and
Mhm.
you write down every single thing they say.
Yeah, we're gonna get a lot of
That
feedback.
report, and there's going to be certain things that really stand out.
Mhm.
It's very likely that some of the ones that maybe you would give 3 votes to, you'll hear many other people do that. And when you get back together, you'll say, well, of course we want to include that.
And I also want to make mention that I like the way in which you crafted number 3 in terms of what are the qualities and characteristics that will support the strengths that we have, as well as deal with the critical issues and needs, because you need that person to understand, you know.
One of the reasons we identify the needs, sure, is we want people to look at that and say, yep, that's what I'm good at. We want people to apply who are a match. But we also want people who can keep their strengths going. So I suspect that some more of these will emerge as priorities when you hear from all of our stakeholders too. This is just the beginning.
And really, a high level of district leadership really is very important. All of that.
This process that we just did is exactly what we would do when we publish it. We'll look at exactly pages, and we will select the paper and we'll type up the report, and you'll get the list of everything that everybody's told us. But we will also identify what we consider to be the recurring themes, the things that come up over and over again, that we hope to make your job easier when we craft the report. Any other questions for tonight? Because we've covered what we intended.
I do have one question. Is there at any point, is there a video included in what we're asking them to submit, so we have a sense of their?
We haven't done that typically. I know that we've done sometimes, but we could. What we typically do is we spend a lot of time talking to these candidates. We interview them at length, and we would do that. But if you would like us to include a brief video where we ask some questions to respond to, I can certainly do that.
I think that'd be a great idea.
Sorry, I didn't catch it.
I think it'd be a great idea to have a video from each candidate.
It's difficult for us to do. When they submit their application, we would give them a few questions. There don't have to be many, that we would ask them to respond to and record.
Something, it wouldn't yield a long response, just something.
No, we want to keep it brief because
right.
Those that will interview will go in much more. That could be helpful to get a sense of how what the person looks like when they answer the question.
Well, because we have such a need for someone to be forward facing with our community, so. Okay.
So I think we can do that.
So I agree with that. I think that would be a great idea. My only thing is, if we get like 100 applicants, I don't want 100, right, of those. So maybe we, at our next board meeting, right, talk about how to winnow that down. I don't mean, I don't mean to limit it, but if we, maybe the top 30 or whatever, you know what I mean? Just not
maybe everybody that third tier.
Right.
Yeah, I think that
second or third tier.
We don't think we need minimum qualifications. We wouldn't bother with giving you that review. But I think the others you want to see.
Okay.
Those that we think are worthy of consideration. Okay. What will happen is there'll be people, be prepared, whose paperwork looks good, And we're going to say to you, we're not recommending that you interview them for the following reasons. We looked into the background, we talked to references, so we think what we found out, but we don't think it'll be a good one.
And having gone through this process before, when we haven't heeded the advice, they have gone to another district and not been a great fit.
I can think of a couple of cases.
Yeah, me too.
You recommended against considering somebody, they tried to go elsewhere, and they struggled. They did not do well. The issues are still there.
Okay.
Are we done then? Or do you have
Right.
any questions?
I thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And our next board meeting will be with the Koski group will be, I'm sorry.
Yeah, tell me, please. Is it March 16th?
They're preparing the booklet and then we're meeting the 18th on Friday at 5:30. That's our next
Yes.
meeting with you.
March 18th is our
Friday.
next board meeting.
So let me remind you that we will be in with Jennifer what is the best day and time, but we will be contacting you to use the person with our phone and video. Typically, a phone call works mostly. We will talk to you as well. And we hope we can do that as early as this week.
All right. Thank you so much for coming and thank you for being here. And I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I do want to talk to Jennifer real quick.
We need to turn off the. You want me to turn-